Full-service radio voice, AM 1240, and an exquisite opportunity we have to discuss An Affair with Beauty. What a title! That's very captivating, and the picture, the portrait on the front cover is very beautiful indeed. The Magic of Youth. Joining us in studio is author James Philip Head, otherwise known as Jim. Thanks for stopping by the studio today, Jim.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, and certainly glad for you to be here. And a very special event is set to occur tomorrow at the Christy studio. There is a gallery open house also planned. You will be there signing books as you have written this book. And as I understand, it is the first of a three-part series, biographical information about Howard Chandler Christy. And as you and I have discussed, this is the first time anybody has ever written a biography about Howard Chandler Christy?
That's correct. That's something that intrigued me very much because as I was doing research I realized that there are thousands of newspaper articles about Christy and his wife Nancy, but there wasn't one biography.
And for an artist to be of such note and to not have biographical information recorded or anybody to actually put together a book or a collection of stories and follow the timeline of his life, did that somewhat startle you?
It did. It took me 10 years to research the book and involved many different interviews, but it was a giant jigsaw puzzle in my mind, a true American story where the pieces were scattered throughout the United States.
And Howard Chandler Christy, of course, people within this listening audience are well familiarized with the name. What drew you to this particular artist, and why did you want to embark on this adventure? It took you a decade to put all this together.
Well, it actually started more than 25 years ago when I was in college. In 1980, I was a freshman at the University of Maryland studying economics, and I was studying up in the stacks of the campus library, and I came across a folio of drawings by Charles Dana Gibson called The Social Ladder. And I pulled down the folio, went through the pen and ink illustrations, and was just simply amazed at his talent. And I thought to myself, why has this been hidden? For years I've heard about all these other artists, such as Van Gogh and Picasso, but here's Charles Dana Gibson, and his talent was rare. 3 years later I came across a book entitled America's Greatest Illustrators by Susan Meyer. And of course Charles Dana Gibson was mentioned in the book along with 10 other illustrators, including the great Norman Rockwell. But the story that interested me the most was actually none of them. It was the story of a once blind illustrator turned portrait painter who was known as the Barefoot Boy of the Blue Muskingum, Howard Chandler Christy.
And so you became fascinated with this story, really by accident from the sounds of things.
It was pure happenstance, but I just thought it was such an incredible story, and then as I started doing a little bit of research, I realized that the story had not been told, but it would take me another 15 years before I would venture upon actually writing the book, and that began in 2006, 10 years ago this month.
So what started, or what prompted you to be able to go from fascination, because, you know, sometimes there's something that captures our fancy, that captures our attention, and it's just a hobby. What took you from being interested or intrigued to wanting to write a book about Howard Chandler Christy?
What started out as a mere preoccupation became somewhat of an obsession, and really it began in earnest in 2000 when I discovered that Howard Chandler Christy's archives had made their way from a root cellar in Wayne Township, Pennsylvania, to Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania, and were there in the library. And as soon as I discovered that, I went through the inventory online. The internet was a huge help, by the way, and discovered what was there. And then it would take me another 6 years to actually travel to Easton, Pennsylvania to do the research. But once I was there, I discovered that not only the story was true, it was better than I ever expected it would be. And of course, all the famous people that Christy knew are mentioned in the archive at Lafayette College. I mean, you would see not just one signature by Harry Houdini, who was a good friend of Christy's, but 5 signatures, 2 by Babe Ruth, 2 by Amelia Earhart, Douglas MacArthur, William Howard Taft.
Really?
It was just incredible.
And the ability to be able to bring his story together, to bring his story to light, this is a first of a three-part series. So what transpired that you had to make that decision, okay, I have way too much information, put this in one book?
My goal was always to bring Christy back to life, resurrect Christy in a way that no one else probably would do it. Most people would write a third-person biography. I decided to write a first-person biography about the artist told through the eyes of his wife, Nancy Christy, a former cosmopolitan model who was once considered one of the most beautiful women in America in the 19-teens, 20s, and 30s. I wanted to do a portrait of the artist in words, and that's how I decided to write the book.
It is an interesting perspective, and certainly the ability to be able to have that perspective and add everything in there. It is going to probably shock a few people, some of the contents in this book, some little secrets along the way that a lot of people, they have this idea of Christy, but you're about to divulge some things that people in this area have no idea.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, there are quite a few Christy secrets. He had over 800 models and painted some of the most beautiful women in America, so naturally there's going to be some scandal. Of course, I mentioned he was once blind. He was an alcoholic and recovered from alcoholism, and so there's that scandal as well. And of course, his first marriage to Maybelle Thompson, a model of his, who was considered one of the most beautiful women in the turn of the 20th century, that resulted in scandal right here in Zanesville, when it created the largest, most highly publicized child custody battle Ohio, if not America, had ever seen, when Maybelle brought suit against Howard over their little daughter.
Especially at that time. And that was unheard of at that time.
Absolutely right. And then to think that Howard would want to live back here in Zanesville and his wife wanted to live in New York, and Howard basically kept the little daughter, Natalie, who at that age was about 10 years old, right here. And of course, she wanted the daughter back, and so she brought what's called a habeas corpus action right here in Muskegon County.
And just one of those things along the way, historical content, there is so much to be spoken about, not only from the artistic standpoint, but as you mentioned, many of the people of note that Howard Chandler Christy not only knew, rubbed elbows with, but was friends with. And it really is a remarkable story.
Yeah, as I tell people, it's not a story about an artist and his art, it's about the changing of America through the first half of the 20th century, a man who influenced it and a man who captured it. And he knew presidents all the way from Teddy Roosevelt, who he rode alongside down in Cuba during the Spanish-American War, all the way through Truman, and painted them all except for Woodrow Wilson. I'm not aware that he painted Woodrow Wilson.
All right. If somebody finds it or knows about it, please pass along the information.
Yes.
One of the neat things, too, the opportunity to be able to be here in Muskegon County for the Christy Studio Gallery Open House, the book signing that you have coming up tomorrow, for people within this area, not only to have that opportunity to see more about his life. Maybe they haven't been to the studio in a long time. Maybe they've never been there. This is a great opportunity. And also to share some stories. I mean, it's one of the things, stories get passed down from generation to generation to generation. And for people to be able to have that experience, certainly to bring it full forward, and for people within this area to also have their perspective. It's going to be an interesting opportunity.
Yeah, the first book concentrates on his early years right here in Muskegon County. And so to visit the studio, it'll really make that book come to life. I think people will be able to envision his childhood.
And for people to be able to see a bit more about the life of Howard Chandler Christy, brought to life in a really exclusive way through the eyes, through the vision, through the words of his wife, Nancy. And for people to be able to see that a little bit more along the lines of perspective, to give them an idea of this artist that maybe they've only just seen or heard in name and just maybe a couple of paintings.
Yeah, Howard was a household name during the first half of the 20th century. Everyone knew who he was. He made headlines all the time, from New York to California, from Maine to Florida. Even when he died, he was eulogized, and obituaries popped up all over the place. But it was intriguing to me how he had fallen into obscurity, and how quickly people that were once famous become forgotten. Completely
forgotten about, and no longer a household name. To be able to bring forward his life, especially in a perspective like this, the three-part series, so all three parts will be from the perspective of his wife, Nancy?
That's correct, yes.
All right. To be able to see the title of the book, An Affair with Beauty, The Mystique of Howard Chandler Christy, and of course this first book is entitled The Magic of Youth, which is also the same title of the portrait. Who is the feature in the portrait?
That's Christy's favorite model, Elise Ford, who was 30 years younger than he was, and she was once considered one of the most beautiful women in America in the 1930s. If you look at her image, you probably will think of the Lucky Strike ads that ran through the
That's her.
mid-30s, exactly.
That's her.
Yes.
All right. For people to be able to see the concept too, that whole idea, that notion, especially in that era, in that time period, to be a Christy girl. It was one of those things that a lot of young ladies, obviously, here is this man from this area of Ohio, and then rises to the point where all of these young ladies want to be a Christy girl.
And really, things haven't changed all that much in terms of modeling. Young women still want to be immortalized, they still want fame, they still want fortune, and that's the same as it was back in Christy's day, from the early days of the Christy girl, which developed in 1899, all the way through his death in 1952. People wanted to be a Christy girl.
And by that, a lot of times his opinion, if you will, was sought out as far as what one conceived of as beauty.
Absolutely right. He was a connoisseur of beauty, and he was the chief judge of the first 4 Miss America pageants from 1921 to 1924.
I did not know that. That's incredible. This is one of the parts of the story, obviously, as you said, you've done a lot of research that's taken many, many years. But to be able to find out all of those little details, I had no idea.
Well, and I think it's something that people forget. They think of beauty in terms of today's beauty, but in yesteryear it was something different. And for beauty pageants, the owners of beauty pageants would eagerly seek out the illustrators, because before movies, before radio, before TV, people bought magazines and books because of the pretty pictures, because of the good-looking men, the good-looking women, and the romance. And so these beauty contestant impresarios would eagerly seek out people such as Christy and his friends Charles Dana Gibson and James Montgomery Flagg, who were the illustrators of beauty. All right.
It is a really interesting perspective, again, to be able to take this book, to see the book written through the visualization, through the eyes of his wife Nancy, from that perspective. Really a unique opportunity to be able to share the story of Howard Chandler Christy. Now, for you, as I understand, you are not an author by trade. That's not your, it may be your first passion, but it's not your first job.
That's right. I'm a lawyer by trade. I do estate planning and trust state litigation in Tyson's Corner, Virginia, for the law firm of Williams Mullen. And so I love writing, but this is different than the typical memos and briefs or even wills and trusts that I draft.
It's a little more entertaining.
Yeah, thank you. I like to think so.
Well, the opportunity for people to be able to stop by and visit, to meet you in person, to purchase a copy of the book. The book is available for sale tomorrow. You will be there signing the book at the Christy Studio Gallery and Open House. It is set to take place tomorrow, 2 until 5 p.m. Howard Chandler Christy Studio, otherwise known as the Barracks, just about a mile south of Duncan Falls on State Route 60. Officially, Blue Rock is the location. And for you to be able to actually step into the studio makes it even more real, doesn't it?
It'll make it come to life.
Absolutely. For people to be able to enjoy, certainly encourage you to take this opportunity, and you have the opportunity to peruse the display of works by Howard Chandler Christy on display. Also, refreshments will be available, and of course you have the opportunity to meet the author. We have just been speaking with Jim Head joining us in studio. The book, An Affair with Beauty, The Mystique of Howard Chandler Christy, The Magic of Youth. It is available for sale on location tomorrow at the Christy Studio. Jim, thanks so much for stopping by today. Do appreciate this opportunity for you to visit us here at WHIZ, and thank you for putting this collection together. I am fascinated, intrigued, and I can't wait to read it. All right, thanks so much for stopping by today. You're listening to AM 1240 WHIZ Zanesville. Time now for ABC News on AM 1240.